Yeah. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for your attendance. I wish to welcome everyone to the inaugural meeting of the Policy and General Committee. Standing committees have been introduced to the council meeting process in order for committees to consider reports prepared by council officers and to make recommendations regarding these reports to the monthly council meeting. Council's delegates on the Policy and General Committee are Mayor Kennedy, Deputy Mayor Hickey, myself, Councillor Bolland, Councillor Brown, and Councillor Jewett. This committee meeting is live streamed via YouTube and recorded and published online on Council's website. To those present in the meeting today, by attending to this public meeting, you are consenting to your image, voice and comments being recorded and published. The Mayor and/or General Manager have the authority to pause the live stream if comments or debate are considered defamatory or otherwise inappropriate for publishing. But participants are advised that they may be subject to legal action if they engage in unlawful behaviour or commentary. So with that, I'll just welcome everybody to the meeting and call for apologies. I have an understanding here that Mayor Kennedy is an apology and Councillor Jewett has asked for a leave of absence because of work commitments. Do I have a mover? Move Councillor Bolland. Seconded Councillor Brown. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Do we have to have a special leave of absence motion or no? Yeah. I will ask for Councillor Bolland to do the acknowledgement of the country and also the prayer.
Thank you, Councillor Allgate. Almighty God, we ask you to invoke your blessing upon this council, direct and prosper our deliberations to the advancement and true welfare of the people of the council area and our state and Australia. Amen. Acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet today and pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging.
Thank you, Councillor Bolland. The next item on the agenda is disclosures of interest. I have none reported here. Are there any disclosures of interest that need to be disclosed? No? Okay, no disclosures. Reports.
Mr. Chair, I don't know whether this will get any support, but I'd like to move that we move into a committee of the whole. It just makes me uneasy, and I think it's just much more productive for a committee meeting, you know, where there's back and forth and more discussion rather than possibly debate, to be committee of the whole. And then we don't have to worry about, you know, asking for approval to speak more than once on an item and so on. We can always move out of committee of the whole at the end.
Mr. General Manager? No problem? No problem. Okay, we accept that.
So I'll move that.
You'll move that way and seconded. Councillor Bolland. All those in favour? All right. Right, for the reports. The first report, Broken Hill City Council report dated number 59/22. Dated March the 2nd, 2022, Office of Local Government Consultation and Council Misconduct Framework. Do I have a somebody move a motion?
I'll move that recommendation as written. Councillor Allgate, Chair.
Moved Councillor Bolland, seconded.
A question there, Mr. Chair. I'm not, so that the motion is that report be received and we note the delegation, but we still have to formulate a submission, don't we? As part of this?
Yeah, my understanding was the council the councillors to form a submission if they so wish, or individual councillors,
Yeah.
or anybody for that matter.
So I'm just wondering,
Staff and
yeah, so what submission are we going to submit? That's my question, because there's, I mean, it's a very long report and a lot of stuff in it. And I'm just wondering, are we going to go through that in detail and work out our views about each of these sort of subsections, or what's our submission? What sort of form is our submission? What do we have to do this afternoon with this?
well, I would have thought that those that have an interest in promoting a position paper or position statement should have had it ready to produce to this meeting. That's my general understanding. I mean, I'm sure Councillor Brown knows I'm not very sympathetic to the code of conduct at all, and from my perspective, the only concern that I have in terms of code of conduct is that, as far as I'm concerned, once a defendant or the subject of a complaint is heard, and the conduct reviewer makes a decision, and then the council makes a decision to either accept or deny the report of findings and recommendations of the conduct reviewer. My concern is that if in fact the defendant then appeals the council's decision to the Office of Local Government, when the Office of Local Government make a decision whether the defendant is either guilty or not guilty, that should be binding on the council, rather than, as it was in my case, where I was found to be innocent by the Office of Local Government, but on the mayor's casting vote, I was found guilty. That's not justice. That's just one axe I have to grind. But I'm not supportive of the code of conduct in general terms, to be honest. So I'd really ask if those councillors present have any particular submission that they'd like to put forward to the council now, or alternatively, put their own submissions in by the 28th of, I think it's the 28th of March.
I don't, that there are a large number of considerations here. I mean, a lot of, I do understand exactly where you're coming from, and but that's only one small part of this whole paper.
I understand that.
That's why I'm just wondering where we start. I mean, we're not going to do it really, are we, much today? So I suppose we just, with the exception of, what you've said about that process, but it's only really a tiny part of the whole thing. I mean, for example, the first consideration here on page 9,
yes.
Should there be separate codes of conduct for councillors, staff and other classes? I mean, do we want it to apply to volunteers or members of the public when they come in, during...
Well, I thought the code of conduct affects all council employees, all councillors, mayors, volunteers, and anybody that does work or volunteers or is involved in council activities is covered by the code of conduct. I mean, normally it's only councillors that get targeted, or maybe some staff, but it's a real open floodgate, because when you look at contractors, you look at volunteers, all of the 355 committees, plus anybody that helps, on a day-to-day basis, whether they're paid or unpaid, they're all subject to code of conduct complaints if in fact somebody from the outside, the public or internally wants to lodge one. As I've said, my concern is that as a councillor of some time, the Office of Local Government has been considered to be the adjudicator, and yet the adjudicator's decisions can be overridden by the council, and that's fundamentally flawed as far as I'm concerned. Who do you appeal to after the council has found you guilty when the others haven't? So really, we really need to ask, does anybody have a specific request or specific alteration to the framework as it's displayed? Councillor.
Sure, your chair. I'm just looking at this. I think if we move this to go to then anybody with the submission has to have it in by the
28th.
By the 28th, and that's at the time when we'll go right through anything else. I would think.
No, well,
Any changes?
Normally, my understanding is normally you go through it before the meeting, and then at the meeting, if you have a concern, you put forward that concern, and the council should develop, a submission based on what the councillors feel.
One thing that just reading through this and some of the questions they ask is whether, well, just to quote one on bottom of page 17, are the procedures for dismissing frivolous and vexatious complaints adequate and effective? How might they be improved? That seems to me like a useful one, so that you can cut off a lot of these at the source. I know, you can. So rather than spending time and, really putting a lot of stress on people, if they, maybe there's an easy process for dismissing complaints, at the first stage, whoever's delegated on council to do it. So I'd certainly be in favour of that, anything to kind of strengthen the role of the relevant person, either within council or maybe someone outside council, because I understand from this that some states they have, and I think even in New South Wales, you can sort of delegate the responsibilities to someone outside to say, oh, this is a bit of rubbish. I think it's just, like an interpersonal thing or something. So, I mean, personally, just looking at this, apart from what you've said, Mr. Chair, some of those the autonomy needs to councils wish, well, understanding your particular point of view about this, but maybe making sure that a smaller number of these complaints actually have to go through and go through this complicated process, so there's a good solid process within council for dealing with these maybe vexatious, maybe minor complaints.
Yeah, well, I certainly agree with that. If you look at code of conduct performance situation across New South Wales, some councils have had an enormous number of complaints. Primarily, from what I can gather, their biases between their personality clashes more than anything else, and people looking for problems rather than looking to better the community. And there are some other councils that don't have any, and some of those are large councils. So handling or processing the code of conduct complaints normally falls with the general manager or a senior officer that is delegated to do that. And one would hope that 99% of the complaints would be resolved in-house rather than handed over to conduct reviewers where costs are involved. Well, it's already in the code of conduct and the procedures for administration. But if you look at Broken Hill, from what I can recall, all of the codes of conduct that have involved councillors have been quite rapidly put out to conduct reviewers. I don't necessarily agree with that, because I think the bulk of them could have been done internally. But yeah, exactly. But it's already in the code of conduct and the administration processes that the council, the general manager, and have the opportunity to do that. I'll just ask the general manager to confirm or otherwise that.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I mean, yeah, that's certainly in the code at the moment, that it can be handled in-house if that's the process to be undertaken.
Yeah.
About Mr. Chair, there wasn't an opportunity to do that because I don't think the information that the complaints had been made sort of went anywhere, for example, to the mayor at the time. I don't think the mayor was aware that complaints had been made in some cases. So it was progressed internally, well, to be blunt, by the council employees who'd made the complaint.
Well, I can't dispute that.
So there was
Councillor
no,
Brown, I know there's a problem.
there was no mechanism within the policy to say, well, someone's got to let someone know that they're going to progress it further.
Well, I'll recall, refer to the general manager again. I thought the initial assessment of any code of conduct involving councillors particularly would be first viewed by or considered by the general manager or the delegated officer that has that role. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Chair. I guess, and if I was going to say, sorry, if I may just make a comment there, I think that's probably one issue, and I shouldn't be getting involved in this, but I guess one issue for the general manager, as it would be about another staff member, it puts general managers or other senior staff in quite awkward positions when they receive code of conducts about their employer, then have to make a ruling on that. If it's one employer against another employer, I think there's a fundamental flaw in the model code of conduct. In a general workplace, you don't usually ask a direct report to review a code of conduct that's about their manager. But when we get to this point, then a general manager is reviewing the conduct of their employer, which, it does put everyone in an awkward position.
Yeah, I understand. And I understand where Councillor Brown's coming from too, but I also refer back to the fact that in the administration procedures, there's provision for code of conduct complaints to be managed in-house. And one would think that given that there's the opportunity for that and it's documented, one would think that the general manager or the delegated officer would actually do the groundwork and decide whether that complaint has to go to a conduct reviewer or can be resolved by mediation or internal discussion and resolution.
Difficulties for the general manager, really, in dealing with complaints against councillors. I can sort of understand the dilemma that you have in knowing what to do. So it's not really, what you say, if it's relying on people's common sense, or it should be covered by somehow by the policy, but I think it's probably too complicated to go into today.
Yeah. I think common sense is the factor that's been perhaps a bit absent in some cases. And I have strong feelings because I've had Councillor Kennedy and I are the two that have had numerous codes of conduct laid against us, never found guilty except by the mayor by the mayor. But the thing is that when you go through the framework and the opportunity for the councillors to provide comment, where would you stop? There's so many, I reckon there's so many areas in the code of conduct framework that need addressing. For instance, I don't believe that people should be able to make anonymous complaints. If people are, as far as I'm concerned, if people have a legitimate claim, they should be man enough to put their name to it. This hiding behind anonymity is just, that's not just, as far as I'm concerned. If you are targeting somebody, you should be able to be answerable for what you're doing, and complainants are not. So do we have, with all that, do we have any Submissions?
Councillor Allgate, Chair, reading through the report, it covers, as Councillor Brown said, it covers quite a lot. And I think a 2 hours scheduled policy and general committee meeting would not cover what is outlined in this report. I note in the recommendation that information on how to make submissions is included in the paper, and councillors can make individual submissions. So while I look at that, I'd recommend any councillors that have had problems with it go through the questions, but it's quite in depth. I'm unsure, through you, Chair, to General Manager Jay, if the council can, in the time allowed before Monday, compile a report on the considerations on each page of the report, commencing at page 9, the considerations. Each consideration's got 5 or 6 there. I'm not entirely sure if that can be delegated to an executive team leader within council to do up a submission that then can be voted on or viewed by councillors prior. The time limit's probably not there, and the recommendation may be that councillors can do it individually. On the code of conduct, as a newly elected councillor 4 months ago, I wasn't over the code of conduct until elected, and once I read it and understood it, quite frankly, as a new councillor, it frightened me. We're trying to get new elected people onto councils across the state, and to be facing something like this, if someone disagrees with something you say, is quite frightening. And it's something I've certainly never come across in private enterprise. I couldn't imagine having to deal with a director or a member's complaint against a director that, as General Manager Jay said, you answer directly to. It certainly puts you in a hard position. The fact that the government has issued this review shows me that the state government is well aware there is issues. In the timeline given, and the fact that we won't have another meeting, it appears to be that the best course of action for councillors who have had issues in the past, such as Chair, Councillor Allgate and Councillor Brown, would be submit your own submission, because I'm not entirely sure we would have time as a council, and certainly we would definitely not have time at a 2-hour policy and general committee meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Boland. So do I assume that we have no submissions? Can I have a recommendation? Can have somebody move the recommendation? And that inclusive of the fact that council, as a council, has no submissions at this point in time. Move Councillor Brown, seconded.
I'll second that, Chair.
Councillor Boland. All those in favour? Unanimous. Item 2, report number 2 is Broken Hill City Council report number 60/22 dated March 09, 2022, review of the Code of Conduct Policy. Councillors will recall that during the workshop, or at the end of the workshop back a couple of months ago, this matter was discussed, I think, and it was decided then that there would be, I think it was 8.1 and 8.1 and through to 8.1H
8.21.
that be removed. And I certainly agree with that. I'm just wondering if somebody would move a motion or discussion, if there's a problem with that recommendation.
I'm happy to move that, Mr. Chair, on the grounds that this is a bit unnecessary, because it really repeats a similar clause in the social media policy. I think that was the reason that was given at the workshop. It's kind of it's superfluous, really. So I'm happy to move that clause 8.21 A to H be removed. I think that was all. I think
that whole that whole group.
Yeah.
were deleted or removed at that time. So you're moving that way, councillor Brown, seconded? Councillor Hickey, all those in favour? Carried, unanimous. I can't get the pages apart. Item 3, Broken Hill City Council report number 61/22 dated March 15, 2022. Review of the social media policy and media relations policy on page 190. There's quite a clear recommendation there. This matter was also discussed back at that at the time of the code of conduct, if I recall rightly. Do we have any discussion or a mover on the recommendations 1 through to 4, 1 through to 5? Sorry.
Chair, Councillor Allgate, the social media policy seems to copy a lot that is in the code of conduct. We seem to be doubling up with a lot of the information on there. But in saying that, I'm happy to move the recommendation as written.
Okay, moved councillor Boland, seconded. Councillor Hickey. Would you like to speak on that, councillor Boland?
Thank you, Chair, Councillor Allgate. As I said, reading through it, it appears that a lot of the social media policy is doubled up with the code of conduct, but I believe that is due to the difference in operation of social media, and it's certainly something that all councillors and council and councillors need to be over and aware of. There's a lot of legislational changes coming about through social media where if a disgruntled ratepayer publishes or anything on your own personal councillor page, you can be held liable for it. I think it's before Parliament as we speak. So there's a lot of changes around social media. And I think it's a policy that will probably need to be revisited every 12 months because it certainly is an area of legislation that's changing quickly. And we're seeing the issues around workplace bullying and bullying through social media, certainly as we head into a federal election, certainly at the front of media currently. So I think social media, we've all been, every one of us sitting in this room as a councillor has been targeted on social media in the last, well, since it came about and certainly since I was elected 4 months ago. So I think it's something that will need to be revisited on a regular basis at a 6 or a 12-month mark, and something we need to be aware of what's happening in government at the federal level as the review around obviously workplace bullying and the use of social media to attack other people personally, not just around, I'm happy to be attacked around, they don't agree with a policy that I support, I'm happy with that, but it's the personal attacks against family and stuff like that I certainly am aware that the government is looking at as well, as someone who also operates social media in a private enterprise environment as well.
Thanks, councillor Boland. Is there speakers against? No speakers against? All those in favour? Unanimous. Item 4, Broken Hill City Council report number 62/22 dated March the 11th, 2022. Appointment of delegates to section 355 committees and other committees and working groups. There's a recommendation there and there's vacancies on 3 particular groups. I'm just wondering if anybody, any of the councillors here are keen to nominate for the Broken Hill Heritage Committee, the Asset Naming Committee, or the Volunteer Working Group.
Mr. Chair, could I just make an additional sort of comment about that?
Sure.
There are some other groups where council's been asked sort of maybe over the term of the council to provide a delegate, and they haven't been included in this. And I don't know whether the general manager has had contact in the last couple of weeks with the North Mine about a delegate on the North Mine committee. Now it's pretty, I don't know why they continued to have this particular committee, but it had to be set up when the North Mine, when Prulia kind of expanded its operations to the North Mine, they had to have a community consultative committee. And we had a Councillor Nolan was the representative on that, and I was kind of a bit of a backup for him when he, if he was out of town at those meetings. And I know, and they had a meeting last week, and the chair got in touch, and she said she was going to contact you about that. But it's just, there are some of these committees that have kind of been left. Another one is, and I think it's probably all these CCC committees. The other one is that still meets is the Silverton, the Wind Farm Committee that I've been on for many years. And again, I don't know really what, it doesn't do anything, and it's only a kind of an information sharing committee, but they do still meet occasionally. They've got a meeting, I think, planned for later in the year, May or something like that, I think. I mean, I'd be happy to continue with that, but if someone else, wants to do that. But there are sort of a couple more of these. I just sort of bring it up because some of these things tend to get a bit lost because they're not on the official list of council committees. And they're the two that I know of.
Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And yeah, thanks, Councillor Brown. You're one step ahead of us. We're actually going to ask if we could include the mining consultative committee, because I did get in touch on Friday about a delegate from council to be on that. So if we could have a delegate added to this list. I was unaware of the Silverton Wind Farm was still actually in operation, so we'll update that one as well. Yeah.
Is there any interest from the floor of the council in the ones that are nominated in the report? Broken Hill Heritage Committee, 2 vacant positions. Asset Naming Committee, 2 vacant positions. Volunteer Working Group, 1 vacant position.
Way, but if you need someone just to fill it up, I mean, they don't meet very often.
Councillor Brown on the Asset Naming Committee. Any other interest from anybody?
Chairman, Councillor Allgate, we may be better off to wait until we have a full council in attendance, or people that aren't here now, we can just put their name up. Because you're not here, you can be thrown on a committee. That's normally how it works. I think Deputy Mayor Councillor Hickey can say that. That's how committees normally work. But as Councillor Brown, I'm already on the Heritage Committee and already got a fair bit. So maybe if we add a recommendation to that, or an adjustment to hold it over to the next full council meeting, or ordinary council meeting, should I say?
Yeah, well, this goes to the council meeting anyway. So the recommendation is to throw it open to the council on the meeting night. Is that what you're moving?
Yes, sorry, I didn't read it properly. That is correct, Chairman.
That's a fact, isn't it? So you're recommending that we accept 1 and 2 of the recommendation, and that the matter be aired at the monthly meeting of the council to find out if there are any other interests.
That is correct, Chair, Councillor Allgate.
Yep, that's correct. I was just going to say, do you mind if we just add the North Mine Consultative Committee and the Silverton Wind Farm to that recommendation, to have that added to the report?
With the North Mine Consultative Committee, was that related to the North Mine Hall?
No.
Or
No, nothing to do with that. It was about the reopening the
Queen Elizabeth.
The Prulia's expansion into the North Mine. Yeah, they had to have a community to let people. It's really it's just one of these committees where you've got stakeholders from various groups, and they just update. Give the most recent information about what they're doing, what Prulia are doing, basically, and what they're doing, what's happening with their plans for the future and so on. It's really just an information giving thing.
Okay. So in
That's
your,
all.
thanks, councillor Brown. In your motion, councillor Boland, can we incorporate the item D and that address the volunteer North whatever they call it,
Community Consultative Committee.
North Mine Community Consultative Committee.
I'm happy to move that way, Chair.
And the seconder? Okay, no speakers against? Or all those in favour? Thank you. Item 5, Broken Hill City Council report number 63/22, dated February the 10th, 2022. Councillor attendance at the Australian Local Government Women's Association Conference, New South Wales Branch, 2022. There's a recommendation there that the Broken Hill City Council report 63/22, dated February 10th, be received. That council considers councillor representation to the 2022 New South Wales branch of the annual conference of the Australian Local Women's Association to be held in Fairfield between the dates of 7th and 9th of July. Interested councillors to provide and complete travel forms to the executive assistants by the close of business on Monday, the 18th of April. Is there anybody here at the moment that wishes to nominate?
I don't particularly want to go myself, but it is quite a good, it's usually quite a good conference, and men can go too. It's not limited to women. And also count women working in local government as well as elected members as well. So it is quite a good conference. So depending on the year, they usually have some well-known speakers. So it's worth considering for everyone. Really.
So if we have somebody move the recommendations, move a motion that incorporates the recommendations, and then those that are interested can follow up. The interested councillors provide completed travel forms to the executive assistant by the close of business.
I'm happy to move that.
Move that way, councillor Brown, seconded.
Can I just please make a comment, Chair, Councillor Allgate?
Yes,
I
councillor.
spoke to Councillor Jewett this afternoon. She's very interested in it, and I think it'll be a great conference for our newly elected female councillor to attend, and I think she'd get a lot out of it. And it's a really, really great networking opportunity for Councillor Jewett, and she has certainly expressed to me that she's very interested in attending that conference.
Councillor Brown, can we, in your recommendation, can we include item 4 where
absolutely knowing that she wants to go?
Councillor
Yes,
Jewett be named?
of course.
And Councillor Jewett to follow that up with the executive assistant. You agree with that, Councillor Hickey? Okay. No speakers against? All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 6, Broken Hill City Council Report 65/22, dated March 04, 2022, 2021. 2022 Delivery Program Key Performance Indicators, Progress Report for the period ending 31st of December 2021, inclusive of Operational Plan 2021 outcomes. It's a lengthy report, and in my understanding, the performance indicators are quite good. Many more are completed, and I think there was only 15 or something like that that still have to be addressed. But overall, generally, I think that the performance report is a good one. Can I have any discussion or a mover of the recommendation?
Chairman, Councillor Allgate, may I ask through you for General Manager Jay just to give a quick rundown of the KPI report, not line by line, but the benefit of it and what is looked at for the benefit of newly elected councillors, please.
Mr. General Manager.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So This is a 6-month report on the delivery program and the operational plan that's set each year along with the budget. So out of the 108 action items, which is basically council's priorities in the operational plan that we've been carrying out, 93 of those are on track, which basically means they're either completed or further than 50% completed on the timeline that we initially provided the council in July. 15 are off track, which means that we're not meeting the timeframe that we had initially said that was initially planned, and obviously need to pick up in those areas over the next 6 months to have those completed by 30th of June. Those areas primarily do relate to the services that were impacted mostly by COVID-19, where we've been delayed or we've had staff shortages. So you'll note that we have got a few areas that are off track within our library services, and that's primarily related to that area struggling for staff during that period of the COVID-19 closure and just not being able to get to the work, and other areas as well with the asset management plan for fleet. Again, that position was delayed and recruited to in late December. So we've only just been able to fill that position. So you'll see an improve when we get to the reporting for the 30th of June, that most of those should come back on track. But of course, as all councillors are aware, we're never going to meet 100% of our key performance indicators each year, but I think the staff have done a fantastic job to have 84% on track with a COVID impacted year and heading in the right direction for the end of the year. They've done a terrific job.
Yeah. I'd be the first to acknowledge that to have 86% of the key performance indicators completed in the time that it's been affected by COVID is a pretty good result generally. I think you'd be hard pressed to find fault with it as far as I'm concerned. But is there any discussion? Councillor Boland?
No, I'm happy to move the recommendations and through you, Chair. Thank you, General Manager Jay, for your outline of it. And of course, like you said, if it was 100%, that probably raises more questions than a 70% completion.
Yeah. Seconded, Councillor Hickey.
Yes, I'd like to second that if I could, through you, Chair. And congratulations, Jay, and your staff on a job well done. Excellent.
Yeah, I agree. Item 7, Broken Hill City Council Report number 66/22, dated March the 7th, 2022, 2017, 2021. Disability Inclusion Action Plan Key Performance Indicators, Progress Report for the period ending 31st of December 2021. What's your pleasure, councillors?
Chairman, Councillor Allgate, again, the report looks really good. And again, congratulations to the council staff for ticking so many boxes in a very challenging environment.
Exactly. You're prepared to, you moved, are you moving?
Yes, I'll move that recommendation as written.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. Well, any further discussion?
Just a question. Is have we got an active committee working in the disability area at the moment? I know that there have been problems and it was sort of moved away from a committee for a while because of the difficulty of getting people, community members to participate. What's the situation at the moment with
Mr.
that?
General Manager.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yes, we do have Disability Inclusion Action Plan Committee. And yeah, it's a very active committee. It's been going really well. Obviously, again, we had the delays with COVID where we couldn't meet in person, but since they've restarted, the staff that have been in attendance as well as the committee members are very active and enthusiastic with it. So it's going quite well.
I know during pre-poll, I don't really like to think about it, but we had plenty of time to observe people coming and going from the plaza, from the pre-poll office, and there were a lot of people who had a lot of difficulty doing very simple things like walking up the curb there. I know that's private property and maybe a different thing, but there are a significant number of people who find great difficulty just getting around doing ordinary things. So there's a real, still a lot of things to be done.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, councillors. Do we have a vote on that? All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 8, Bracknell City Council Report number 67/22, dated March 01, 2022. Section 355 Advisory and Asset Committee Manuals and Constitutions. Quite a lengthy report with lengthy manuals and a whole host of recommendations. Do I have any comment initially, or a mover of the recommendation?
Can I, Mr. Chair, make a
Comment?
couple of comments? I mean, there's a huge amount in this, and it's probably, we don't want to spend too much time talking about the detail, and some of my questions are relating to the detail of it with some of the constitutions of committees that I'm familiar with. I've just got one question about kind of getting things started. I mean, I suppose it's a detailed question, but the timetable for kind of reviving the committee or getting the new committees together, it doesn't make sense really, because it said, the old committee cease operation. There's no committee, but then the secretaries, at one point it says the secretaries are required to kind of call the first meeting or get the meeting going, but there is no secretary. So I'm just wondering how it's all supposed to start.
Well,
There is no one there. There's no one on the committee except the councillors are appointed. They're there, but at the moment there are no committee members, because the committees have now been formally dissolved. So there are no committee members. There won't be committee members for another month or so. So when that happens, those committee members, presumably those names will come to council for endorsement. But so you've got committees, you've got councillors. So who calls the meeting? Because there's no office bearers for the committee.
no, well,
What happens?
I understand that.
It doesn't kind of really say.
I mean, over a period of time, over the last few years, some of the people that have volunteered for the committees have thought that they have been over-governed in many respects. And one of the highlights that I see as a problem is the fact that some of the committees I've been on, and I'd rather not name them, you never get, some of the councillors never get advised when the meetings are being held, if in fact they're being held. And I know on one committee that I was on, they didn't have one meeting in 12 months.
I've had that.
So,
experience.
it's a bit of a farce in some ways.
Well, I just have some, some similar, not concerns, but I just think it needs a bit more thinking through how you get the whole thing, how the whole thing starts, and make sure the whole thing starts, properly. Because, it does depend on somebody sending out, contacting the members of the committee.
Exactly.
But there isn't anybody, unless you're saying, unless you're saying it's a responsibility of the councillor representatives to call the meeting.
Well,
Which has never been the case, but otherwise, who does call the first meeting of these? 355s.
Would you like to comment on that, Mr. General Manager?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. The committees are still in place at the moment. They're just in caretaker, as they were once when council went into caretaker. The committees go into caretaker until a new committee is appointed. So the process that's been outlined here is all committees are still active as they are in caretaker mode. Following the adoption of the constitution and frameworks, it's then open for council to invite members of the public to put their expressions of interest in to join those committees. We can't do that step until obviously they understand the frameworks and the constitutions that council have adopted, so they understand what they're being involved in. And at that point in time, once council endorsed the new committee members, it would be proposed that the chairperson, which is a councillor, would call that first meeting. Obviously, there's support from council staff to do that, but a chairperson generally does call the meetings for committees.
But it doesn't say in the constitutions that the chairperson is the councillor. One of them does. One of the constitutions specifies that council will appoint the chairperson, but the others select their own chairperson. So there's no chairperson. That's what I'm saying. You know, I mean, in practice, the old committees stay on. The people tend to stay on the same committees. You know, so the previous secretary probably, you know, lets people know. But if there's no previous, if the previous secretary doesn't want to go on with it, or, you know, isn't renominating or whatever, it could be left as councillor, as the chair said, you know, without anything happening at all.
Yeah, my only comment is that some people have said to me that when you look at the manuals and the constitutions, the responsibilities involved for volunteers tends to be a bit much. They get frightened, a little bit frightened, whereas others are happy to go on it. And from my own experience, in the 15 years that I've been a councillor, I went to a few Alma Oval meetings because I was contacted to say the meetings were on. Norm Fox Oval, for instance, I never, in one particular year, never got a call, but I did get a call when things went wrong and the watering at Norm Fox Oval wouldn't work, and it hadn't been working for 12 months, things like that. You know, I think it's important that councillors be on the committees, but not as the only workhorse on the committee either. And I mean, I don't think personally, I think the manuals are great. The constitutions are pretty sensible. How you actually get the committees to have the right sort of complement of members is another thing. And I don't know that there's any easy answer to that, Mr. General Manager. The point tonight, though, is to adopt the manuals and the constitutions.
Yeah, again, I'm just wondering whether these constitutions, I don't know, I suppose it's a question of what happens first. But for example, I was looking at the art gallery one, and it says, you know, there are 9 people, but then it's got, you know, 2 councillor reps, 7 community members, and then a young person and a First Nation person. So there are 11 people. So things like that, I think, you know, I mean, there's a lot of detail in that. Maybe they need to go back to the committees once they get going, so that they can look at their constitution and kind of maybe there's a room for comment on that if they need to be. I mean, that's a small thing. It's a bit of a fiddly, you know, it's just a question of numbers, but the constitution, as far as I can see, isn't accurate. There are actually 11 people on that committee and not 9. Yeah,
but the art gallery committee, there's a consistent attendance at their meetings, whereas some of these others, there's been no meetings.
Yeah.
That's the problem with some of the others.
Yeah, it isn't, but it's but things like that, you know, you just need someone who's interested in it to kind of, to look at it and make sure it makes sense.
Yeah. I just, from a personal perspective, before there were any constitutions printed and manuals printed, people were quite happy. People seemed to be quite happy to put their hand up and join committees. Once there was, I'm not sure how long ago, it's quite a few years ago, there were some changes to the constitutions, and that frightened a few of the regulars away.
Exactly.
And because, well, I know 2 people who approached me and said that they felt that they were being overgoverned, that they weren't able to make their own decisions, and you know, being bound by council constitutions and whatever. That's just a couple of instances, but we have a report before us, and whilst I accept that people are reluctant at times when they read constitutions and read the manuals. I think we have to have them. In this days, you've got to cover everything by a policy, and if you haven't, you lose credibility. So really, I need a motion of some sort in respect to this particular matter. There's 12 recommendations there. Somebody prepared to move a motion accepting all or part thereof?
Yeah, well, I think we've got to get going on it. I mean, you know, we really have to get moving on it, but I'll move it in its present form.
I think we all understand the problems.
Yes.
That's the important
Yeah, there
thing.
is still, I'm not totally happy with that, but I'll move this in the interest of getting things going and, you know, inviting
Right,
new committee people.
Councillor Brown, secondly, Hickey. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Item 9, Broken Hill City Council report number 68/22 dated March the 7th, 2022, investment report for February. Once again, I'd congratulate Simon for the report. In tough times, I think we're doing a little bit better than many are. And the report, as far as I'm concerned, the report is quite comprehensive. But I'm just looking at my notes here, and I also have a call for a motion to consider 2 urgent motions by Councillor Hickey. When should I do that, Mr. General Manager? After this item or as part of this item?
After this item,
All right.
then go through that process.
So in terms of the investment report, can I have anybody want to comment?
I'll move the recommendation.
Move Councillor Brown.
I'll second that, Chairman.
Seconded, Boland. Any speakers for or against? No speakers for or against? All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Now I'll refer to a call for a motion to consider 2 urgent motions by Councillor Hickey. 1, the Local Government New South Wales motion item 16, Georges River Council ban on developers and real estate agents serving as councillors. And item 2, implementing a monthly council newsletter to all residents. See attached. Does everybody have a copy of that?
No.
Can we give a copy to? I've got it up there. I'm sorry. Councillor Hickey. Oh, sorry. Can we have somebody to move acceptance of the urgent motion? Move Councillor Boland. Seconded.
Just a question, why, I'm not clear why this is urgent, why it can't wait till the next meeting? I thought a matter of urgency really.
I think
there
you'd
was
have
a
to hear
time-
you'd probably have to hear the comments that should be offered by Councillor Hickey if an urgent motion is considered. I mean, as far as the chair is concerned, if there is a call for an urgent motion and it seems to have some merit, I think it's only correct that an opportunity be given to have it heard. That's my personal feeling. It's not advice to the councillors, but it's the way I feel.
Isn't it in our code of meeting practice that, so I thought there had to be, you know, a time constraint, time urgency for it to be urgent. Otherwise, it just gives us more time to consider a motion rather than have it, you know, to be considered
Yeah,
without
I'm
any
not sure about that.
preparation.
I think if the council can move an urgent motion if they so desire, but there again, the decision rests with the council. Do I have a mover?
I move that way, Mr. Chairman.
Move councillor Bolland. Do I have a seconder? As the chair, I'll be seconder.
Hasn't councillor Hickey moved it?
Pardon?
Councillor Hickey moved it, didn't he? So it's
No,
been
this-
moved.
No, this is the call for an urgent,
Oh, right.
call for an urgent motion to be heard or tabled. I'm not comfortable moving as a seconder, but if in the absence of anybody else, I'll be a seconder. All those in, you want to speak against councillor Brown?
I'm just speaking against not the motion itself, but just the fact that it's
The machinery.
presented as an urgent motion. I don't see, I mean, if it's to be sent to the next local government New South Wales meeting, is that, or conference, for next conference? That won't be for another 12 months. So there's plenty of time for that. You know, it wouldn't be, as I understand, it wouldn't be able to be rescinded by the local government association. I don't know how their constitution works, whether they can, it would have to go to a full conference because
Have
it was
to go to-
voted by a full conference.
have
So
to go to
it's
the annual
12 months.
conference.
So it's another 12 months before that would be, so there's no urgency as far as I can see for that one.
Pardon? Sure. Councillor.
Councillor Brown, Councillor Turley told me on the telephone from Sydney on the day that they would listen, they wanted to hear it again in their September meeting.
Okay.
That they were quite prepared to hear comment on it. And I don't know that they can rescind it that day, but they certainly were prepared to listen to an amended or to a change in the motion, which is what I've put up. There's also other parts to it that we need to get through urgently to other areas throughout New South Wales well before that.
Mr. General Manager, have you any comment on the procedure?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. A item of urgency when due notice is not given, which is the 3 days prior to a meeting. It is up to council's discretion. It's usually when a natural disaster and emergency happens, or when the matter can't be deferred until the next council meeting. So if it's a council matter in regards to whether or not they think that there's going to be time to the next council meeting. That's the main consideration at the moment. Can this matter be held over until the April committee meeting, or does it need to be dealt with now due to time constraints from the motion? So that's what needs to be considered.
Right. Well, it's been moved and seconded that the urgent motion be accepted. Is there speakers against?
Can I?
Oh, yeah, yes, Mr. Chair, on the lines that I said, I still can't see. I'd forgotten that there is another. The next conference is September, but we would have time. I just don't think it's a really good practice to introduce urgency motions that we don't have time to consider or to think about before the meeting. I mean, I also understand, looking at the motion itself, you know, where you're coming from there, obviously, you know, from your position, I understand it's something that's affects, you know, regional areas quite differently from city. So I understand the purpose of the motion, but I just am not happy about treating it as a, you know, I assume I'll be outvoted on this, but yes, I don't think it's a good idea to deal with it as an emergency motion, because I just can't see that it is this one.
Okay. Any speakers for?
Comment.
Councillor Boland.
Chairman, Councillor Allgate. I believe it's any motion that calls an entire profession corrupt is urgent to me and needs to be addressed straight away. This motion that was brought up, and I was there, is basically calling every real estate agent in this state corrupt. And I think any motion that calls a group of professionals corrupt needs to be dealt with urgently. And I'd like to see a response from this council urgently as well. My thoughts are, if there is corruption in the real estate industry, you go after the person that's corrupt. You do not go after an entire industry, and you do not call an entire respected industry corrupt. Where does it stop? Does it go to teachers then? Does it go to doctors, ambulance drivers, club CEOs, for example? Where does it stop? So to me, calling an entire industry corrupt at a state conference, a state special conference, needs to be dealt with as a matter of urgency. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, councillor Bolland. We'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? 3 against. So it's councillor Brown against, councillor Bolland, councillor Hickey and councillor Allgate in favour. Now we ask councillor Hickey to present his motion, urgent motion. Councillor Hickey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, for Broken Hill City Council, forward a motion to the next LGA New South Wales to rescind the resolution passed at the LG New South Wales conference to adopt a policy that wants to preclude all real estate agents and their families in close contacts from serving as councillors. The motion to be number 2 is the motion to be resubmitted as follows: that Local Government New South Wales calls on the Premier of New South Wales and the Minister for Local Government to ban developers only from serving as councillors. 3, that it is noted that Broken Hill City Council supports the rights of all to represent local government if they meet the current legislative requirements. And that the Broken Hill City Council forward a copy of our proposed motion to all New South Wales regional councils and shires, requesting that they write to the LG New South Wales in support of our new motion, due to the fact that real estate agents are an integral part of regional country councils and shires, and that our councils would be dramatically affected if the current motion was passed to legislation. And if that is passed, then it highlights a huge difference and divide between regional and city members of the LG New South Wales, and possibly regional councils and shires should consider reverting back to the separate City Council and Shires Association. For that, Broken Hill City Council write to the Real Estate Institute of New South Wales and the Australian Property Institute of New South Wales, requesting their support in the form of representation of the Premier and Minister for Local Government to not allow the original motion to pass to legislation.
Thanks, councillor Hickey. Can you just clarify the urgent motion for ordinary council meeting 30th of March? Can we have a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Bolland. All those in, any speakers against? Councillor Brown?
No, Mr. Chair, I'm not. As I said, I do understand where the motion comes from. I don't. If anything, I'd just move that we
The question of urgency.
modify, part 4 of there, because I think it would be a very bad idea to go back to separate shires and local government association. I don't, but I do. I'm not. Really speaking against the rest of the motion itself. So
Right. Most of your concern was about the urgency, the way I understood it.
yes, that's
Yeah.
what I was speaking against before.
Yeah, okay. Any further speakers? Yeah, mover of the motion.
Yes, if I could, Mr. Chair. I've had lots of calls throughout from regional councils throughout New South Wales, because they knew that I had made the comment on local radio, and it was broadcast, and it creates quite a bit of concern throughout the state. Just in Broken Hill and Wentworth, we would lose 2 mayors, 2 deputy mayors and a councillor, because our mayor's daughter works for a real estate agent. I'm a real estate agent. The mayor at Wentworth's a real estate agent. The deputy mayor's a real estate agent, and they got a councillor. So that'd be 5 personnel out of 2 councils. It just doesn't make sense because we're in the community all the time. We're talking to the voters all the time. We're speaking to the electorate the whole time, every day of the week. Just would not make sense to get rid of. It mightn't concern the city councils anywhere near as much as it does regional, but certainly regional it does. And if preclude that whole occupation, well, it just doesn't add up. And you have to declare any interest anyway at any time. So, you know, if any conflict of interest, if you don't do that, there's pretty hefty fines and you can be barred anyway. So I just think it's a matter of councils controlling their own councillors without banning a whole workforce or a whole institution.
Thanks, Councillor Hickey. Will I put it to a vote? Or if there are any speakers against? Put it to a vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors and staff members for attending.
I've got another one.
Cool. You got another one?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Urgent motion for ordinary council meeting 30th of March 2022. Is that the one you're talking about? Monthly council newsletter. Sorry, I did. So can you people see the rest of the council? Yeah, it's up there on the read the monthly council newsletter. The council be provided with a report at the April ordinary meeting about the costs and logistics to provide a monthly newsletter to all residents. That the newsletter would potentially include meeting dates, events, stories, mayoral column, etc.
But again, Mr. Chair, this is not an urgent matter.
Pardon?
No, this is not an urgent
Yes.
matter. How can you? I find it really hard to see how you can justify this as an urgent matter. This is a perfectly good motion, but it's not an urgent matter.
Councillor
Yep.
Hickey?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Brown, it's urgent in the fact that it needs to get to our general manager to get the logistics of it and the costs of it, because months have gone by now. Our voters don't know anything about what's happening with council. The paper doesn't print things correctly. We're not against the BDT, but sorry, mate. I do apologise. Could you hear that, Councillor Brown, or not?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. There's nothing against the BDT, but a lot of people have pulled out of the BDT and don't get it any longer. We're getting requests every day of the week. All this is to get this underway so that we can see the feasibility and the costs. And the reason it's urgent, because if it's held over till April, then it becomes May before we get a reply back. And then it becomes June before it even gets into action.
Look, I have absolute sympathy. The general manager will know that I've had long discussions with him about this late last year about this. So I absolutely sympathise. I think it's a really important thing to do and we need to do. But I'm just concerned that we're going to have meeting after meeting matters of urgency that aren't urgent, that can wait. You know, there's a notice of motion, properly costed, or though we don't require that anymore with the notices of motion, but I just think, it's a bit like the boy who cried wolf. When there is a real urgent motion, then I don't know, it'll be just swallowed up in all these other motions that I just don't believe are urgent. And I think our code of meeting practice, I know that the chair can decide whether a matter is urgent, but I just don't accept that this is an urgent matter. I just can't support that. Well, I absolutely 100% support the motion itself.
Yeah.
I do think it's a really important thing, but I think we're kind of losing track of how the meeting should run if we just accept it as the urgency.
Well, I also think it's important, and I also think it merits urgency. Are there any speakers for? Councillor Boland.
Thank you,
You have the right
Chairman,
reply.
Councillor Allgate. I agree with the comments made by Deputy Mayor Hickey and yourself, Chairman, that I believe this is urgent and it fits into the urgency. Ratepayers are crying out for easier information to what's happening at meetings when meetings are on. I see a member of our community in the public gallery tonight, and I know one of the concerns that the ratepayers raised several times has been the access to information around what's happening at meeting times, etc. And I think this goes a long way, and I agree with Deputy Mayor Hickey or yourself, Chairman, I forget who said it, that it's 1 month and then it's another month, it's another month. So by the time it's rolling out, we're looking at July and August, and I think the ratepayers are calling for information sooner than that, especially with the state of certain media outlets in Broken Hill.
Thanks, Councillor Boland. The right of reply.
All good, thank you.
Put it to a vote. All those in favour?
Voting for the motion itself or the urgency?
No, the vote of urgency. Well, we voted on the urgency of the first matter.
Yeah, that's what
It's
I'm
a
asking.
second matter now.
Yeah.
That's my understanding. It's got to be dealt
Yeah.
with independently.
Yeah, so we are voting for the urgency, not the matter itself.
Yeah. So we're voting
Yep.
as to whether this is a matter of urgency or not.
Yep.
Okay, all those in favour? Councillor Hickey, 3. Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown against. Councillor Boland, Hickey and Allgate 4. So now we'll deal with the motion. And Councillor Hickey, would you like to move the recommendation and put forward your case?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Move the motion for the monthly council newsletter. 1, that council be provided with a report at April ordinary meeting about the costs and logistics to provide a monthly newsletter to all residents. 2, the newsletter would potentially include meeting dates, events, stories, mural column, etc., for the public to get a better understanding of what's happening at the council.
Okay, seconder. Councillor Boland. Speakers against? Against them?
No, I'm not going to speak
No.
again. I think it's a great idea. but-
All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you, councillors. I think it's now the end. Thanks for your attendance, and the meeting, the inaugural meeting of the Policy and General Committee finishes at, what's that? Too late, 7:46, 47? 6:40, yeah, sorry. Thanks for your attendance.
Thank you.